To lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Marley Press, and thank you for all the fine work that you do with the city of Roswell, and I don't know what we'd do without you. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilmember Judy. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Administration and Finance Department. Councilmember Matt Tizer. Please take it away, Councilmember Tizer.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 1 is approval of an ordinance to adopt a millage rate of 4.995 for fiscal year 2021. This is the first reading.
Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to adopt a millage rate. Now, therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell to establish a rate of 4.955. The millage rate has a component of 4.705 mils for the general fund, operating and capital improvement budget, and a component of 0.250 mils for servicing bonded indebtedness. They have approved this to be the first reading of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Mr. Luckett.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have a brief presentation to share with you. Everyone see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
So we are here to present the first reading of our millage rate ordinance for FY 2021. To give you a little bit of background, our FY 2021 budget was adopted by the Mayor and Council on June 8th. And that budget was based upon an estimated tax digest and a millage rate of 4.955 mils. We did receive a preliminary tax digest from Fulton County on July 7th. And we've used that digest to base our recommendations to you. We've moved forward with those numbers and gone forward with our millage rate advertisements as required, which includes all of our advertisements that were posted in the local newspaper, as well as our community relations department publicizing this on social media and through our city website. Our millage rate hearings are scheduled. Of course, this is the first one today. We will have another one this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then our final millage rate hearing is scheduled for Monday, August 31st at 7 p.m. Before we get into some of the details, I wanted to just give you a brief highlight of what the millage rate actually is for those who may not be familiar. So as you can see here, the millage rate is really just another word for our property tax rate. And really a mill is equal to $1 for every $1,000 of a property's assessed value. And in the state of Georgia, the assessed value is 40% of the total fair market value of a piece of property. So you can see in the right-hand column over here, a property with a fair market value of $250,000 has an assessed value of $100,000. And then at 1 mil, the property tax on that kind of property would be $100. Also wanted to point out that our property values, that's something that is provided by the Fulton County Board of Assessors. And they provide those numbers to us for our property tax billing purposes. For our Roswell residents, there are 3 millage rates that appear on their property tax bill, and that includes the millage rate from Fulton County Schools, Fulton County, and the city of Roswell. So you can see based on this example that we have here, this is based on last year's property tax rates. So you can see that for Fulton County Schools, the millage rate was 17.796. For Fulton County, it was 10.119, and for the city of Roswell was 4.955, and all of that equated to a total tax bill of $3,287. Our millage rate for Roswell consists of 2 components. One is the maintenance and operations piece, and we also have a piece that services our bonded indebtedness for those projects that were approved by public referendum. So overall, if you take a look at our total property tax bill, this is kind of how it breaks down. The Fulton County Schools portion makes up about 54%. Fulton County makes up about 31%, and the city of Roswell makes up about 15% of the total tax bill. Moving on, I wanted to give you an update on our property tax digest as we know so far for 2020. Our gross digest for tax year 2020 is at $6.196 billion. That's a $78 million increase over the prior year, and that's about a 1.3% increase over the prior year. If we look at the specific components of our digest, you can see that our residential properties increased by 3.1%. Our commercial properties decreased by 3.4%, and the other category decreased by about 0.7%. So as you can see, when we talk about our 2021 approved budget, the budget anticipated residential growth of about 3%, but the commercial growth we anticipated was about 7%. And as you can see here, the commercial digest actually decreased over the prior year, so that will impact our revenues for 2021, and I'll speak more about that in just a moment. This slide gives you an idea of our property tax digest by property type and the change from the prior year. So you can see that our residential properties for tax year 2020 make up about 72% of our total digest. Commercial properties make up about 25%, and then we have other categories that make up about 3% of the total digest. Roswell does offer 3 or 4 homestead exemptions available to Roswell residents. 2 of these exemptions are for seniors age 65 and over. All seniors age 65 and over qualify for a $2,000 decrease in their assessed value. And then seniors 65 and over with an adjusted gross income of $40,000 or less also qualify for a $20,000 assessed value decrease. Disabled veterans also qualify for a tax exemption. And then the floating exemption, which began last year, as you can see, that's our largest one, and that reduces our assessed value in the city by about $616 million in the current year. So total, all of our homestead exemptions offered in the city of Roswell total about $661 million. And that equates to over about $3.3 million in tax savings for our residents, which is about an average of $114 per household. Carrying this on to look at how this tax digest impacts our revenues. So this chart compares the current year estimate to the prior year actuals. So if you take a look at that, you can see we do expect our revenues to grow by about $400,000 over the prior year, or about 1.6%. When we compare our current year estimate to what was actually adopted in the budget for FY 2021, that's where we see the negative variance, mainly due to the commercial property growth that was less than anticipated. So for the general fund, that works out to about $500,000 less than what we budgeted. We're about 1.9%, and that's about the same for both the general fund and the debt service fund. As I mentioned in our prior presentation and the memo that was sent to you all, that deficit, or that, not a deficit, but the negative variance can be made up through a variety of ways, and we'll be working on a recommendation to provide to you all as we come for our first quarter budget review. Also, there's a chance that the digest will fluctuate a little bit because we don't have the final numbers yet. So once we get those, we'll have a better idea of how to move forward. This chart gives you an idea of our millage rate history for the city of Roswell over the last 10 years. So you can see from all the way from FY 2011 to 2019 or 2018, our millage rate was at a total rate of 5.455. And then in FY 2019, that rate was decreased to 4.955 and has remained at that. And we're recommending to stay at that rate for FY 2021. This chart gives you a comparison of the millage rate for our neighbors in North Fulton. And it highlights both the M&O portion and the bond portion. And you can see, just to kind of break those up for a moment, the M&O portion puts Roswell at the second to lowest millage rate among the North Fulton cities at 4.705. When you combine both the M&O and the bond rate, then Roswell's right in the middle at a total of 4.955 and is about the third from the lowest. I also wanted to provide some information on our appeals. So this is for 2019 appeals, so the ones that were filed for last year. So as you can see, last year there were 1,425 total appeals. To date, about 80% of those have been resolved. And just to give you an idea of how those worked out, so about nearly 50% of those, the value was lowered. 32% had no change, and there were just a couple there that had an actual increase. I also wanted to mention, of those 692 that were showing as being lowered, that's about 573 residential properties and about 119 mostly commercial properties. That total reduction that as a result of these appeals translates to an assessed value reduction of about $123 million. That's about 2.2% of our total digest. Most of that is in the commercial properties. And we did go back and take a little bit of a deeper dive into what was going on with our commercial digest. And just to give you an idea, we looked at the top 10 largest commercial decreases that we saw. And it looks like most of these properties were ones where they were reassessed in 2019. The property owners did appeal, and that resulted in a decrease in the assessed value. Those top 10 largest commercial decreases that we saw totaled about $47 million in assessed value. That's how much they dropped by. And those included 8 different apartment complexes, a hotel, and it also included the East Side Target Shopping Center. In terms of our millage rates, we are not proposing any change for FY 2021. So our maintenance and operations portion would be maintained at 4.705 mils. Our debt service portion would be at 0.25 for a total rate of 4.955. Our rollback millage rate, which we are required to calculate by state law, totals 4.685. The rollback rate simply takes the millage equivalent of the total net reassessment that was included in the digest and turns that into a millage rate. So basically, if you look at the total assessments that we had, total reassessments, the increase for 2020, that equated to about 0.43% of our total digest. And so the rollback rate simply says if we were to drop our millage rate by 0.43%, that would be the equivalent of 0.2 mills. So our millage rate would drop from the M&O portion, 4.705 down to 4.685. So because we are proposing to maintain our maintenance and operations rate at 4.705, then we're required to advertise a proposed tax increase of 0.43%. So just to sum everything up, overall our tax digest has increased by 1.3%. Our new and existing homestead exemptions have reduced our digest value by $661 million. Regarding our revenues, we do expect them to be less than anticipated by about $500,000 for FY 2021. 2020 appeals are not known at this time. We haven't gotten any information, and actually that appeal deadline has been extended a little bit, so we won't know for a few more weeks what that looks like. So the recommendation is to maintain our millage rate of 4.955 mils, which would, as I said before, that would be unchanged from the prior year. Next steps, we have our public hearing on Wednesday, August 26th at 6 p.m. and then our second reading of the millage rate ordinance. That would be on next Monday, August 31st at 7 p.m. And I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Council have any questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. Thank you, Mr. Luckett. It was a great presentation. This is my first millage rate go around, so I do have a couple questions if you can help me. On slides 11 and 12, I was a little confused. There was no change in the debt service, but yet there was a percentage for change in the right-hand column, or I just wanted to follow along on those. I didn't understand that.
Yes, that was just because we're rounding to it was 1.5 million. So dollar-wise, you couldn't really see it when we rounded it to that much, but overall it was a percent decrease. Okay,
thank you. And then also, can you explain how our budget, our proposed budget was adopted, and how does that relate to the rollback rate? Can you just put those two together for me, please?
So really the rollback rate isn't connected at all with the approved budget. The rollback rate, we really don't know until we actually receive the digest from Fulton County or a preliminary number from Fulton County. And when you think about the change in our digest year over year, there's really two pieces to the change. There's either reassessments, which are just increases due to market value increases, and there's new growth, which it might be, an actual new construction of a home or a commercial business. The rollback rate, the attempt is to say that let's capture that reassessment portion and translate that into a millage equivalent. And if we don't roll our millage rate back to basically make that reassessment piece neutral, then we have to show that as a tax increase. So the reassessment portion is simply just that millage equivalent of, the rollback rate simply takes into account the millage equivalent of the net of all reassessments that occurred.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions, comments from council? Seeing no hands up, we do not have anyone in the queue from the public that would like to speak. So I'll bring it back to council. Additional questions or comments? Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. Mr. Luckett, as always, a great presentation from you and your departments. I appreciate all that detail. So I guess I just have two questions I want to make sure I'm crystal clear on. And I think Councilmember Hall somewhat kind of asked them, but I just want to make sure I kind of understand. So first off, my question is, you mentioned that if this council does choose to keep the current millage rate, then the recently approved budget has a $500,000 shortfall. Does that make it so that it's not considered a balanced budget, or how does that work under Georgia law and just historically how Roswell handles that, if that's the case?
So the budget is balanced because, it's based upon the estimated revenues and expenditures that are adopted at the time. We are responsible as we go through the fiscal year, and we know we have a better idea of how our revenues or expenditures are going. We have a responsibility then to make adjustments to our budget if we think that, they're not going to meet what we had anticipated. So as we learn more information, that would be the plan, that we would come back to you all and make those necessary adjustments so that our budget continues to be balanced as we go through the fiscal year.
Excellent, thank you. So that was my first question. I appreciate that information, Mr. Luckett. And then my second question, I just want to make sure that I'm fully clear on how it works. So as you've mentioned, the current proposal and keeping the millage rate the same is a tax increase for our residents. And I just want to be clear, to avoid the tax rate increase, that's that rollback. So in other words, if we want to avoid giving a tax increase to our residents this year, then to do that, we would lower it to 4.685. Am I understanding that correctly?
I would say yes, according to state law, that's correct. But there's a very real chance, and then not even a chance, there's a certainty that, depending upon the property and the actual value of the property, they may or may not still see their property taxes go up. But this is meant to capture it for the digest as a whole.
Right. Yeah. So in other words, it's not necessarily looking at each individual property, but as a whole, if we as a whole under Georgia law do not want to increase taxes for our residents this year, 4.685 is the millage rate we would need to approve.
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilmember Wilsey.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you, Ryan, for a great presentation. I just wanted to confirm, you mentioned we were $500,000 below the budget that was approved. And that budget that was approved was one that was extremely streamlined based on the projections related to COVID. Is that correct? I mean, we are still, salaries are frozen. We weren't able to fully fund, ask for sidewalks and repaving and some improvements that we are actually having to defer because of the COVID related decreases, correct?
Yes, there's quite a few operating, maintenance, capital, and capital requests that were all deferred or unfunded to try and make sure that we were operating within the revenues that we anticipated at the time.
Right. Okay. So this is a very bare bones streamlined budget that we're working with and trying to fund at this point. Correct?
Yes, I would say so.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Judy.
Mr. Luckett, could you tell me again, you had said that you had thought there would be a 7% growth in commercial, and instead we had a 3.7% loss?
Yes.
What does that number come out to? I think you said.
So the commercial digest was a 3.4% drop. That was the equivalent of about it was $54 million decrease in assessed value for commercial properties.
Thank you.
Additional comments, questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So Ryan, great presentation, clear as always. I want to go back to doing the math. How do you calculate? Is the millage rate, but if you keep constant the millage rate, and it's a question that I have for Ryan, if you keep constant the millage rate, but you increase the assessed property value. Is this considered a tax increase?
Yes, I mean, if you maintain the same millage rate, and our property digest grows in value, because of reassessments, then that meets the state's definition of a property tax increase.
Okay. And, if you had to write a check, you would have to write a check for more. If the millage rate remained the same, but your property value have been increased, the valuation or the assessed value have been increased. So not only I think is for tax law, but Georgia state law, but also by checkbook of property owners, right?
Right. I mean, but the key thing just to point out is that rollback rate, that is, again, looking at the digest as a whole, and every individual property owner kind of, it varies depending upon those specific circumstances. But generally speaking, yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you. I don't have any question this minute.
Additional questions, comments from council? Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. Mr. Luckett, could you explain what if we adopted the rollback rate compared to keeping the current millage rate, what the differences are to the city as far as being able to operate in our budget? I guess I keep trying to tie this to the budget.
Okay. Well, I guess if we maintain, we know that if we maintain the current millage rate, we are already going to have to find $500,000 somewhere, whether that be in increased revenue in a different revenue source or looking at expenditure savings somewhere else. And so if we roll back the millage rate to the rollback rate, then that will just increase the negative variance of this property tax revenue that we're talking about. So I think it would be about $100,000 increase in the negative variance. So instead of about $500,000 down, we would be about $600,000 below where we budgeted. We would just have to find that somewhere else. But as I think Councilmember Woolsey mentioned, because of the fact that we didn't fund a lot of the operating maintenance capital items, we would just need to be able to figure out how we would manage that moving forward.
And let me interject here and give my 2 cents. And first, we were talking about the $500,000 in decreased revenue. But then also, I'd like to remind you all that when we adopted the budget, we had a shortfall of $500,000 or $500,000 in operating. And we chose to fund that from the capital projects fund, the unassigned fund balance, to make our operating budget meet. So what we are actually talking about right now is we started out with a $500,000 deficit. Now we've got a $500,000 deficit. So we're talking about $1 million because I fully expect, because running our operating budget off the unassigned fund balance is not a good practice. And I firmly believe that that money needs to be paid back into that fund. But then also, we talked about, Ryan mentioned the appeals. We don't know how the appeals are going to stand. The other thing we don't know, we haven't had our first quarter budget review yet. So, and these are some of the things that we chose to put on hold when we adopted our budget. The budget does not include an annual raise for our employees or any new position. It defers facility maintenance. It reduces funding for road resurfacing and sidewalk construction. It delays Fire Station 2 land acquisition. It delays the opening of Mimosa Hall, and it reduces the funding for all partner organizations from last year's budget levels. So when we are talking about budget shortfalls, it's far greater than the $500,000 we're talking about right now. We're talking $1 million plus. We're talking in the millions when you factor in road resurfacing, sidewalks. So I do not believe that it would be prudent or responsible to the taxpayers of Roswell to roll back the millage rate at this point in time. I think that we've got a very slim budget that we're working with. These are difficult times. And even though I've got all of the faith and trust in our staff, they have never had to deal with the global pandemic. You and I have never had to deal with it. So, Councilmember Tizer, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to put those numbers a little bit more into perspective. The items that we had to take out of the budget, the employees' annual increases, the road resurfacing and repair, and the maintenance budget for all of our 70-some buildings. We reduced the budget for those items plus a few others by about $9.5 million on a $70-some million operating budget. Not having those things in the budget is an unsustainable situation. When you add this now $500,000 or $1 million, if you want to repay the unspent fund from last year, we're looking at numbers like $10.5 million that we have to find a way to cover. Now, Director Luckett shared with us that the rollback rate would amount to about $100,000. So the difference between the rollback rate, and I think this was Councilmember Hall's question, the difference between the rollback rate and the 4.992 proposal is $100,000. Now, if you do the math on that, that's right about $3 for the average home in Roswell. And for that $100,000, we get to keep 2 police officers on staff. We get to keep probably one and a half paramedics to keep us safe during this situation, or a number of programs that we're trying to fund for our seniors and our kids during this pandemic. So for $3, for $100,000, considering that we're close to $11 million off of where we need to be, having a discussion about this much further than this, I think our citizens are much more in tune with what's going on than to spend time talking about this particular bit of change. That $100,000, I think, as both Director Luckett and the mayor have said, gets eaten up pretty quickly in appeals if they don't go our way. But even at that, being over $10 million off where we need to be, I think it's irresponsible to do anything different than what staff has recommended at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. I want to be very clear that I think it's probably pretty obvious based on my questions earlier and really the last few years when I found there was some irresponsible choices in the budget that I want to lower our millage rate. I do not want to lower it by $100,000. I want to make sure we're lowering it by a greater amount. And I think what we need to do is, for the residents, we need to be responsible and actually go through what we're actually spending the money for, because there were some points I agree with. There's a lot of things that we should be spending money for that we're not. And that's something we all agree upon. The issue is that's not actually what's in our budget. So what we did was the budget that was approved, which I did not support, what it did was it cut a lot of things that residents want and residents need around road resurfacing, around really properly compensating our first responders, sidewalks, many different aspects, Mimosa Hall, et cetera. But what was in the budget was regarding staff travel, the second highest staff travel in the history of Roswell. So in the COVID year, staff travel has never been higher. And it'd be very easy for someone to bring up that, well, perhaps they won't end up using that travel dollars, so that's not an issue. It's actually a bigger issue, because if something's approved in the budget and isn't used, it means it can actually be used for other things without public comment, without public input. And in addition to that, the fact that in a COVID year, we have one of the highest education budgets that we've ever had in the history of Roswell. So we haven't decided to roll up our sleeves and just need our departments to look for virtual trainings and different opportunities to save money. What we also had was the fact that we have cars that have been approved in the past that didn't end up being needed and used. We have consulting amounts of dollars that have been set aside without any purpose or current need. And they're in amounts where there's no need for public input. If it's not used, it can be used for other things. And so at the end of the day, I agree, there's a lot of things that I want us to be able to get for our residents, but this budget didn't do that. So what I feel we need to do is we need to be this year reducing our revenue by reducing our millage rate by at least $1 million, at least. And with that, what we can do is we had a budget discussion that had, I think, about $780,000 of recommended deletes, and that was without any actual work sessions, any resources from staff, et cetera. We need to, I think, be creating work sessions and other opportunities to show that just as residents are having a tough time and we should not be raising their taxes this year, we should be reducing their millage rate. We need to show that we're going to do the right thing and really even set us up for better success next year to make sure we have a budget that has things that are more focused on resident benefits and makes tougher decisions.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. I would like to remind you that we've got a spending freeze going on. We've got a hiring freeze going on. I'm telling you, I can't even get a printer for my office because we've got a spending freeze going on. So I believe that you are disseminating some false information and leading people to believe things that are not true. Councilmember Tyler, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councilmember Palermo is fully aware of why the travel budget is higher than it was. And that's a result of insourcing our ComDev inspectors. That's a majority of it. I think we went through that during the budget session. Let's not fool our citizens. Let's tell our citizens the honest truth. All of those items that were just read off don't add up to anything close to the $11 million we have to come up with in order to do the things that we normally do every year. Road repair and maintenance of our facilities, and salary adjustments for our staff members who frankly are risking their lives every day through this COVID pandemic. So talking about lowering a millage rate by $1 million is a great thing. Nobody likes tax decreases more than I do. But we cannot pretend that we don't have issues here with a budget, and we cannot run our city on pandemic politics.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So, well, so as our city administrator mentioned early on, maintaining the millage rate imply a tax increase, property tax increase. So point number one, I do not support that. So point number two, I didn't support the budget, 2021 budget, because I found that, seems to me that was with a very divisive attitude in a my way or the highway approach. The mayor and 3 council members refused to incorporate to the current approved budget any of the 13 residence-oriented improvements recommended by Councilmember Palermo, Hall, and myself during the budget approval process. So since I couldn't support the, my way or the highway attitude budget approved by the mayor and 3 council members, and on top of that, now we had to be increasing property taxes by maintaining the same millage rate, it's going to be very hard for me to do this because, first of all, I didn't approve and support and agree with the proposed budget, point number one. And point number two, now we are increasing property tax by maintaining the same millage rate. So it's going to be very hard for me to support the proposed increased millage rate.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. And I would like to point out that it is not a my way or the highway budget. We had budget reviews, we had budget conversations, and I personally am doing what I think is right for the city of Roswell, just as you are doing what you think is right for the city of Roswell. So don't characterize my decision as my way or the highway and that I'm bullying you. I resent that. What I'm doing is I am doing what I think is right for the citizens of Roswell, and I have to sleep at night. And that is what my decision was based on. It had nothing to do with bullying. It had nothing to do with my way or the highway. And I really resent your characterization of that, because we had adult, professional conversations about our budget. We discussed this during our budget. So please do not characterize it in this way. Councilmember Judy.
Thank you, Mayor. This is nothing but politics and talking around in circles again to confuse people of what's really going on. Doing anything but adopting this millage rate this evening is putting every person's job in that building, out on the street, in the police cars, in our fire department at jeopardy, because we don't know what's going to happen here in the future with day to day with this pandemic going on. And so for me, the safety of the citizens, keeping up what we need to keep up right now the best we can to move forward during this pandemic, and looking at the budget every quarter is the most important thing right now. But going in here and saying, hey, let's do this because we just want to play politics and talk in circles is not okay. And just like Mayor said, I really am upset and sick of the attitude of, we didn't get the 4 votes to pass this, so it was my way or the highway. It was bullying, and it wasn't done properly with proper information. It was. I sit here today with knowing that I did the right thing for the citizens of Roswell and continue to do the right thing for citizens of Roswell, and not what politics and promises that are not backed up by facts and statistics bring us to do.
Not very fair. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So first off, I want to be very clear, and Mr. Luckett, if I'm saying anything that's not completely accurate, please let me know. When there's an operating expense that is approved in the budget, there is the opportunity, if it's not spent, there's the opportunity it can be spent on other things. And I've seen multiple examples of that. An example of that dealt with the operating budget regarding the cars for those auditors that Councilman Zapata and I opposed a few years back. The majority of this council supported. We opposed it because we said it was not necessary, not needed for these auditors to drive around in the business. The majority of this council chose to spend that money. Those cars did not end up being needed, and those will be able to be reassessed. I've got other examples of that as well. So that's where I think it's dangerous to have a budget where it approves things that isn't necessarily going to get spent, because what we need to be doing is coming up with more safeguards and measures where the residents can absolutely see ahead of time if staff or anyone else is going to redirect any money. So that's the first aspect of it. The second aspect of it, I heard concern for the first responders, and I actually really appreciate hearing that concern. But instead of just politically using that as a concern to discuss, here's what really shows standing up for our first responders would have been. The budget that we proposed, that there ended up being 3 council members that supported, involved fixing a pay issue to our police officers. But instead, the travel budget was more important. There was something to actually give our firefighters some full-time support, because all the actual firefighters, the non-command staff, they're all part-time. And this is important help, especially during COVID. And that wasn't selected because, again, there was no tough decisions made around consulting, around many of these inefficiencies and education budgets, et cetera. So at the end of the day, I think we all agree on things that are positive. We all want more sidewalks. We all want more roads repaved. The problem is that's not what this budget's doing. And this is not the time to be giving a small tax increase to our residents. It's the time we should be really decreasing taxes. And if next year we actually sit down, and I want to see us do an actual zero-based budget. Now is the best time ever for us to start early for the next year, we should be doing a zero-based budget in front of the public, have public meetings to go through the zero-based budget, and then we can see what is the right tax amount, what is the right choices, et cetera. But this council chose not to do that.
Councilmember Tizer.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. I'd like to remind Councilmember Palermo that this council does not prepare the budget. The budget is prepared by staff, the city administrator, reviewed and presented by the mayor. That's how the process works. Council member has been here long enough. I think he understands that. But here he goes again, playing politics with your safety and attacking your quality of life. Councilmember Palermo knows full well, and if he like, I'll play the video for him, that the change in the salaries of the police officers were command staff and not the officers on the street. He said it in the video. I'm more than happy to play it for you, but that's what you said and that's what it was for. And so I don't want to have an argument and a discussion. I think I heard Councilmember Palermo say he'd like to reduce the millage rate by $1 million. $1 million. $1 million when we currently are running $10.5 million behind last year. Folks, we're having it's a discussion I can't even believe I'm part of, and I'm ready to make a motion whenever you are, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Tizer. Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So, if all of those, residents, taxpayers, and people of Roswell who didn't have the chance to attend the Monday, June 8th, 2020, 7 p.m. regular mayor and council meeting, I would like to invite them to watch the video, especially from item 9 to 21, where we propose all the different improvements to the budget. You can see the video of the meeting. It's a public record, and then you can get your conclusion of the level of seriousness that the people who approved the budget gave it to the recommendation that we made on June 8th, 2020, 7 p.m. on Monday, item 9 to 21. Unfortunately, I don't have with me the minutes, so you can go straight to the video, and I don't know. So, you will see clearly the attitude to discuss the add and delete items that I have to push forward for discussion because I was totally trying to avoid this discussion, and I made sure that adding this on the regular agenda, I will force this discussion. So, and then you can get your own conclusion about it. Thank you.
Yes, I as well would like to encourage everyone to review any of the videos of our council meetings, our committee meetings as well, that we have discussed these items over and over again. Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for the lively discussion. I would like nothing more than to approve a decrease in the millage rate and a decrease in the taxes that our residents pay. But I'm really frightened when I look around and I see roads that need repaving and potholes that need to be filled and sidewalk gaps that need to be filled. We've had discussions about needing to add to our full-time fire department. We're talking millions and millions of dollars here that have been cut from the budget for this year. The items that you're talking about for travel and training, those things are expenses that allow the employees that we do have to do their jobs better on behalf of the citizens. So those are just some of the things that run through my mind, when we're looking at the budgets and the sacrifices that have been made. Again, we're also looking at declining values of commercial properties and kind of some policies that have been put into place that are going to limit improvements of some existing commercial properties. So, for those reasons, I am hesitant to, be able to approve even the tax decrease that I would like to. So those are some things that I think we do need to consider for the long term and the big picture of our city at this point.
Thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So what I think is really important is we're thinking long term. And with that, what I think at least $1 million cut shows is we acknowledge there are some things in the budget that weren't necessarily benefiting residents, because in the private sector, there's still the need to always better themselves and get more education, but there's ways to find cheaper ways to do it virtually, et cetera. So we need to find ways to reduce our operating budget. What I think clearly I can count, and unfortunately there will be a tax increase voted on tonight, but what I request that everybody strongly considers doing is much earlier next year, we start a zero-based budget and we go through everything. And then I think what we're going to do is I think we're going to find a lot of operating savings, and it's going to give more opportunity to find more money to spend on capital improvements that we all want to make, we all feel we need to make. And I think it will also do a better job of justifying to the residents if we go through this full long process that we've looked under every nook and cranny, which I don't feel we've done. So that's what I wish we did this year. And again, I think we've beaten this dead horse, but I appreciate everybody's time and healthy discussion.
Additional comments from council? I'll just make a couple of closing comments before I call for a motion. Councilmember Kaiser, I realize that you might not have looked under every rock and nook and cranny. I can tell you that I did. I can tell you that I had hours upon hours of meetings with staff, and we were looking at cutting anywhere we could cut. So this was not a frivolous budget by any stretch of the imagination. When you keep referencing education, and you know as well as I know that part of that was an accounting issue where some of a previous fiscal year was included in the current year budget. So let's not even go down that road. But also I can lay my head on the pillow at night and I can tell you that the hours that I spent, the hours upon hours that staff spent looking at this budget and looking ways to cut it and giving up. I mean, staff came to me. It wasn't me. Staff came to me and said, we've got to forego a raise this year. We cannot ask for a raise. Now, as you all know, when I was elected as mayor, I told staff that I would present a budget with a 3% raise every year. That did not happen this year. That was a recommendation of staff. So, you know, our staff is foregoing many things to trim this budget back and give us a decent budget, because they know above all else that we as elected officials do not want to raise taxes. And don't quibble with me about the legal definition of raising taxes on the millage rate. We're keeping the millage rate the same. It's been consistently low for as long as I've been in city politics. And I think that our staff is doing a great job in managing our tax dollars. Having said that, Councilmember Kaiser, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do, Mayor. I move to accept staff's recommendation of the 4.955 millage rate for the 2021 budget year.
We've got a motion by Councilmember Kaiser. We've got a second by Councilmember Judy. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes with Councilmember Judy, Kaiser, Wilsey, and my vote. And those in opposition would be Councilmember Palermo, Hall, and Zapata. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Recreation and Parks.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Item number 2, Recreation and Parks, approval of the installation of Mac Henry Brown Historical Marker in Riverside Park. I believe Dina and Mr. Leatherman are going to present this very worthy item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And Councilmember Judy is correct. Dina will be presenting on behalf of the department tonight, so I'll turn it over to Dina. Thanks, everybody.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just give me one moment to share this presentation. Can everyone confirm for me that you're able to see properly? All right, thank you so much. Well, good evening. I would just like to provide a brief summary of this request to place a McHenry Brown historical marker. It's a request to install a marker within Riverside Park. This request is coming from the Fulton County Remembrance Coalition, and they are partnered with the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, out of Alabama. EJI joins with communities to install overall historical markers in order to help cities and citizens deal with and recover from the tragic history of racial violence. The Fulton County Remembrance Coalition has been very active with their purpose. They have held soul collection memorial ceremonies of Fulton County's 36 documented lynching sites. They're in the process of erecting historical markers, and they hope to claim Fulton County's monument from the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. But overall, they aim to foster dialogue and reconciliation regarding this difficult topic. The picture you see to your right, this is an example of the historical marker located at the DeKalb County Courthouse, which was placed in 2019. And this gives you an idea of the appearance of the marker and its shape and size. I do want to point out that it is a fairly dark blue background with gold trim and gold text. The process is pretty extensive with EGI. EGI does cover the cost of production and shipping of all the markers, and you can see the specifications on the slide as to its shape and size. Again, it is a blue background with gold lettering. One side of the marker, the narrative that tells the story of the individual lynching victim, in this case, McHenry Brown, that copy, that text is negotiable. The second side, the reverse side, that narrative and historical context is the historical context of racial terror lynching overall and providing that story. That copy is non-negotiable and has been provided by EGI, and that text is provided in your packet. The proposed location site within Riverside Park, if you look for the yellow arrow, this is to the west side of the park along the Roswell Riverwalk Trail, and it's close to Vickery Creek, the convergence of Vickery Creek and the Chattahoochee River. And the overall purpose of the site location, and what you see to the picture with the red X, this gives you another viewpoint of the proposed site location. The idea is all about proximity. This is not the exact location of where the body was found. We're not 100% sure where the death took place, nor where the body was found. Historical record does tell us, it gives some indication that the body was located and found where Vickery Creek and the Chattahoochee River join. And this is an approximate area of that location. But it's also about public awareness. This site was located not only for proximity to where the body was found, but also the fact that it's a public park promotes public awareness. It also provides a better chance for educational opportunities. And I also want to point out that there's a connection to existing historical markers in this park as well, which you see in the picture. This is a historical marker from the Georgia Historical Society program. The overall financial impact is really just the city will need to cover the installation, nominal installation of the marker itself. However, EJI will cover any repairs. They will recover a replacement of the marker if necessary. And the Fulton County Remembrance Coalition, they are working toward developing a group of people to work toward repair as well as cleaning and regular maintenance for the marker. Quick summary is staff recommendation. I would like to point out that on July 30th, this was presented to the Recreation Commission. Their recommendation was to move the project forward to council. And then August 11th, it was presented at the committee meeting, and the recommendation was to move forward to regular meeting as tonight. Staff recommends approval of the request with a condition that the marker text, the copy of the McHenry Brown narrative, is reviewed by city staff prior to installation. So thank you very much for allowing me to present that summary, and I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. Does council have any questions? I don't see any hands going up. We don't have anyone in the queue that would like to speak on this topic. So council, if you don't have any questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 2, the installation of the McHenry Bound Historical Marker in Riverside Park.
Second.
We've got a motion by Councilmember Judy. We've got 4 seconds. Tizer, Wilsey, Hall, and Zapata. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it is unanimous. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Mayor. First item I have is approval of a text amendment to Chapter 3 Alcoholic Beverages, Article 3.4, Location of Sales, Section 3.4.1 Zoning Requirements. Basically, this is a text amendment to allow packaged beer and wine to be sold within a Parkway Village district. Currently, we allow liquor stores, but we don't allow them to sell packaged beer and wine. So this would allow that and correct that. Okay with you, Mayor?
Please.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 3 Alcohol Beverages of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell regarding zoning requirements within the PV or the district formerly known as Parkway Village and for other purposes. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and then approve this to be the second reading.
Council have any questions? And Mr. Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So I know I stayed silent on the first reading. I did speak at the committee. I just want to kind of again share my thoughts. I certainly see and understand why council wants to bring this forward and pass this. My thought process is I could certainly support the beer and wine being added. The reason, or I guess my thought process is, though, it's my understanding in the Parkway Village area, there used to be no liquor, beer, or wine. And it's my understanding that with the UDC ended up allowing liquor, still not allowing beer and wine. So really the loophole was my understanding, the loophole was the liquor side of it. And so either way, nonetheless, liquor is allowed. And of course, I think it makes sense if you're gonna allow liquor. I understand allowing beer and wine. My thought process, though, is that before just completely removing the restriction, I'd like to, my preference would have been to have just looked at what other things would be important to the community, and what are the different rules, relevant rules. For example, hours of operation, just other aspects, vaping products, different things like that. Again, those are just discussions I would have had, but nonetheless, I certainly understand why this council prefers to just go ahead and remove that. I just wanted to kind of share my thought process.
Councilmember Tizer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was handed a stack of well over 200, probably close to 300 petitions requesting this change. And I would like to, I would like to thank Councilmember Zapata for co-sponsoring this with me. Ready to make a motion if there's no other discussion.
Well, Councilmember Tizer, we do have someone in the queue from the public that would like to speak. Yes, sir. Please go ahead and speak.
Hi, my name is Steve Yurchak. And Mayor and council members, all do such a fantastic job up there. I really appreciate your effort. And, I sold that property to my client, and it was former Wendy's, and the property was really run down and getting worse. And so he spent over $2 million basically improving that property over there. Fantastic job. And I would encourage all the city members of Roswell to go over and take a view of this place. I mean, he did a beautiful job in the exterior. He renovated the interior, and all he's looking to do is sell beer and wine. And I think this was a glitch in the law, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening and taking the time out of your busy schedule to weigh in. Additional comments from council? Do I have a motion? Councilmember Tizer.
Thank you, Mayor. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Tyser. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Judy. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it is Judy, Hall, Tyser, Wilsey, and Zapata. All those opposed? Councilmember Palermo. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Mayor. That final item I have is the approval of a resolution to expand the Canton Street Restaurant District. The Roswell City Code, Section 3.7.15, provides for the creation of a restaurant district by resolution of the mayor and council. This resolution would expand the current Canton Street restaurant district. It would basically be on the west side of Atlanta Street, from Magnolia down to, I think that's, I have one, but.
Does Marley have one?
Marley can throw it up there.
So excuse us for a minute. We're trying to put a map up to share it on the screen. Thank you. Can you scroll down a little bit? We're at the southern end. A little bit more. There, okay, we're good. Perfect. Okay, Mr. Davidson, can you describe what we're adding here?
So what we'll be adding is the west side of South Atlanta Street from Magnolia Street down to, I think it's Pratt, but it's directly adjacent to Hill Street, up over to Mimosa, and then the properties down to 112 Magnolia, which is just to the west of Thomas Street. And all of those properties will be added. All this allows is for a restaurant to sell a drink that can be carried out of the restaurant. That's all it does.
So Mr. Davidson, would you explain for the public that right now you can take a drink from home and carry it through the city?
Currently, somebody could walk with a drink, that is correct, along this exact same route. If they brought a drink from home or parked somewhere nearby, they could walk that same area and do so legally with a alcohol beverage.
Thank you. Does council have any questions? Not seeing any hands up. There's no one in the queue, but we do have we reached out to RUMC, and there was an email exchange that went back and forth with Mr. Halsey and Ms. Walsh with RUMC. And it's my understanding, and I can put it up on the screen, it's my interpretation that the RUMC had several questions. Those questions were answered by Mr. Halsey. I did not receive any documentation of approval or disapproval. They just had questions that were answered by our legal department. Would you say that's correct, Mr. Davis?
That's correct.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about that? So we don't have anybody in the public in a queue. Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So, and thank you for that update, because I know it's an important thing from the committee to make sure we did get we did officially alert and notify the nearby church. And so I talked to some parishioners, and at the same time, glad that you made sure Mr. Halsey gave the official outreach. With that, also heard from a number of nearby neighborhoods as well, that as the mayor mentioned, are able to walk by with a cup and able to go drink at a restaurant there, but not be able to take one to go. And I know one of the council members that voted against this, the concern was around speed of cars right there. I do want to point out that the majority of this council did approve when we moved it to cross Highway 9, where it's definitely more windy and some faster speeds. And I think this is an important opportunity just to support our small businesses And again, it's small businesses that are all already able to serve customers. There, the question is really just, are they allowed to have a plastic cup to go? And again, I definitely want to support our small businesses there, and this is something that I support.
Additional comments from council? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Palermo. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Hall. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.
Thank you.